We're talking about blockchain and the capital markets. My name is James Black. I'm with the Canadian Securities Exchange. We are a big sponsor of the show. We're obviously a marketplace here in Canada that many of the companies that are in the blockchain space decided to list on over the past year. But we're going to have a warts and all look at this space and what's to come in the future, because it's been a very exciting sector, blockchain, but it's also been very extremely volatile. So we've had a lot of ups and downs in the space from a capital markets perspective. So my panel with me today is a combination of pundits and people that are in this space operating companies. And I want to get their feedback on where the market went in the last year and where it's going, and why we should probably still have some optimism. In fact, a lot of optimism about how blockchain can, from an investor standpoint, generate huge capital returns. But I think there's still going to be a couple bumps in the road. So I'll let everyone introduce themselves succinctly and maybe explain to the audience in your introduction why you're involved in the blockchain space. What pulled you into whatever career you're doing before to jump on this technological trend?
Hi, my name is Zayn Kalyan. I'm CTO of Blockchain Technologies. I guess I got into the blockchain space because I saw it was an opportunity to be part of the next generation of, or building a new financial system, the foundation of that.
My name is Pavel. I'm the CEO of Bluzelle. We are a decentralized database, so think about it as Oracle meets Airbnb. So what got me into the space was two things. One was, I believe the current internet is severely broken. It's grown too much, and that's how we get a bunch of data breaches, data leaks, and you're hearing more and more every day. Blockchain technologies can efficiently fix a lot of those problems and make a better form of the internet. Second is, I believe blockchain and cryptocurrencies gives access to more capital to specifically emerging markets, so people who've been held out of have wealth creation and asset increases. So it's a more open system that allows people in emerging markets like Vietnam, Thailand, Burma to be able to access capital and increase their livelihood.
Dean?
My name's Dean Sutton. I'm the CEO of Northstar Venture Technologies and the director of Blockchain Canada. Used to be called BlockTech Ventures. I got involved in this space for a very simple reason. There's, every 20, 30 years, there's a fundamental technological shift that does something substantial. We looked at basically the opportunity when there's a new technology that comes into industry. We looked at enterprise is going to have to understand how to leverage and adopt this, and it has another fundamental impact on capital markets. So we looked at when new technology enters the market, the same way that technology changes industry, it changes culture. Look at what happened in the dot-com boom, then you look at this. This is an infrastructure that is going to power a number of things, and we just said there's a huge opportunity to help enterprise organizations focus by vertical, adopt and understand this technology, and the same thing with capital markets. And we just decided that these are the two avenues that we feel have the greatest impact. There's a need to develop the infrastructure to enable that progression, and be active in that. And there's a ton of opportunities that come out of every single industry once you really get into the weeds. So mainly it's new technology creates vast new opportunity, but you need to build the architecture, the tools, the infrastructure to help industry get from point A to point B. And there's a ton of arbitrage in the middle, and building platforms that help facilitate that is where we're focused.
Great. My name is Shone Anstey. I'm the executive chairman and co-founder of Blockchain Intelligence Group. We've been around since 2015 myself. I've been involved in cryptocurrency since 2012. Members of our team 2011, and we're not new to tech and software. We've been in analytics and search since early 2000s, as it were. One of the things that attracted us to the cryptocurrency market, and Bitcoin in particular, Ethereum ultimately, is our view that Bitcoin represents so much more than just payment. Payment is a great first use case, but it really represents a fundamental shift to how the internet is going to function. It really represents that trust layer of the internet, and its opportunity is far bigger than people are really understanding. From our company perspective, we're very focused on providing the data and the understanding and the compliance and tools that allow mainstream institutions to engage in the space. But ultimately, it's going to go beyond payment and will represent a continued push through big data.
Awesome. Thanks for the introductions, folks. 1 year ago today, or near today, I should say, Extraordinary Futures was held at this building. We had a packed room with Alex Tapscott espousing the benefits and really the revolution that blockchain was going to bring to the table, to the markets. We saw a litany of companies come into the public sphere with blockchain businesses and concepts attached to them. And if you look at many of them today, they're at 52-week lows. And hey, I work for the exchange that has a good portion of these, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but something fundamentally happened from last year to now. A lot of capital flowed into these issuers, a lot of activity and a lot of frothiness came into the market, but it also created a lot of opportunity. But before we get to the opportunity, maybe just from your perspective, folks, because I know a couple of you do operate these companies that are publicly listed, from your vantage point, what the hell happened? Why didn't everyone just keep buying, and why did they sell?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly, people are tied to the price of Bitcoin and looking at that as the barometer of the health of the industry and the health of the growth of the global Bitcoin trust network, as it were, layer 8 to that 7-layer OSI stack. And that's been volatile itself because you have the birth of a whole new technology and a whole new asset. But overall, on a private level, if you take out the public view of it, cryptocurrency market and blockchain, and I would like to say Bitcoin because Bitcoin represents the public blockchain. It represents the internet of tomorrow. And it is, in this infrastructure and all the things around it are growing at an astronomical rate. We can't even keep up during the day. But it doesn't reflect in the public markets yet. Ultimately, it will. There's a lot of time that people have rushed in there, and for our company, we're sitting on a large cash position, and we continue to be laser focused. I think one of the things that investors should and probably will look at is how focused is the company, and what problems are they actually solving within this space. I think we do see a number of companies that are rushed in there that may not have the technical expertise. The teams behind them are trying to do too many things, and when you're dealing with cutting edge technology, it typically will take you 3 times as long, cost you 3 times as much.
Right.
Because it's much harder than it looks.
Yep.
That's how you create value. You can only create value by solving difficult problems in tech. Otherwise, there's no point.
So digitizing cats is not a big problem in our world. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even some things to talk about on that front where, we traverse the globe to see what's going on from what level, from what organizations, and you can go to New York and hear the CEO of FedEx talk about how it's going to fundamentally change their business, but also supply chain management at large. Then you see a friendly Vancouver company come up with a game that runs on the Ethereum platform and basically maxes it out and shuts it down. So this industrial platform has a ways to go. But in terms of going back to your question, what happened to the market, I think it's super simple. It's human nature, it's speculation. Point to an industry that came out that didn't have this natural rise and boom, this innovation trigger. It's nothing new. It happens in every sector. It happens with every wave of technology. This is purely no different, and I think it's well understood that new technology, new enablement creates a lot of this speculation and opportunity, and the Canadian capital markets are obviously first to react. If you look at what we're doing in cannabis, we look at what we're doing here, it was a natural drive to get in, get first, and get a piece of this, and whenever you see that, you obviously see this settlement back down to earth. And I think this is the most incredible time because the learning that comes from that initial rise, the data, the precedent that comes from it, the education, the awareness, you now look at this and say, okay, where are we at? This happens in every cycle, but now we're setting this foundational framework of growth. We understand more, we've seen more. But to me, it's this first burst that we saw, to me, to be expected.
Yeah, sometimes learning has a cost, I guess. Zane, anything you want to add on that?
Well, yeah, I guess, as Dean said, just that boom created so much, there was so much crap that came out in that boom, right? But at the same time, there was a lot of capital raised, and that capital is kind of the foundation of what will be the next push. So the actual winners and the technology that will become a product of that capital that was raised will drive the next, what actually comes to fruition. What's that?
Yeah, and I was saying to you, Sean, if you raise $20 million as a public company, that's your Series A, B, and C down in Silicon Valley potentially. So, there's valuation things you might want to figure out from that perspective.
Well, some companies use that money, put that money to good use, and I think there's a lot of companies that have depressed values and that aren't necessarily representative of how valuable they actually are, just because they've caught in with the rest of the companies.
Right. Dean, you guys mentioned something that's critical to anyone here as an investor that you need to evaluate. Who's running the company? What talent, skill set do they need to have? Using cannabis as an analog, a lot of the first public cannabis companies were run by ex-mining people, and then you started to see the people that have been growing, the scientists, people that understood distribution, how to move product. So from your perspective, Pavel, I know you're talking to me about this. What sort of talent set are we going to have to see come into this market to actually add value? Not that we're actually some of the best people up here right now, but we need more. So what skill sets are we going to see to come into this market?
I think the reason I'm still like, this is opportune time for everybody to get in and just keep going because of the price levels they're at is because I don't look at it as blockchain as just a technology. You've got a whole new industry. I was even talking to my accountants in Singapore the other day, and they're talking about, I was saying, hey, you got to reduce some of these fees you're charging me because you guys are learning on us. And they said, oh no, we learn from each company. That's just part of it, and the fees stay. I was like, no, but I'm not a company. This is an entire new industry that's changing. And they're like, well, every industry changes. I was like, no, this is like something that hasn't been done in 300 years.
Right.
So you guys are learning off me and going to charge the next guys more. Just like, basically, if I go and test out my database with a POC with XYZ big company, I'm going to take a hit on that initially so they can test it out, get that proof point. Same thing I'm saying to the accountants and lawyers. They're all saying, yeah, we're all learning because this is the craziest thing that's happened in 300 years.
Right.
So I look at it more of the ecosystem is just growing more and professionals are coming in. So an example is you have cryptocurrency publications, journalists who've been doing well, and they just kind of over the last 2 years, they're like, oh wait, my site just got bigger. I'm writing this stuff, but they're not really professional writers. So there's guys I know who work for Thomson Reuters, Forbes, all these guys, and like, wait, what are all these crypto guys writing these websites? They're getting tons of traffic. The leaders out there, these guys don't even know how to write.
Yeah.
And so they're leaving their jobs and saying, wait, it's just like the startup world is like, this is a new industry, completely disruptive. Why don't I just start, my dream was to own my own company. I'm just going to be a writer in this space and have my own site. Same thing you're happening with marketing companies. Big space is if I was a woman, and everybody thinks that to be in blockchain and crypto, you got to be a guy, you got to be an engineer, you got to be in finance. No, forget all that. It's like women are good designers, they know how to educate. There's women who are basically in Asia saying, I'm just going to set up cryptocurrency seminars or blockchain seminars to teach people one-on-one because people still don't know how to buy.
Yeah.
So those opportunities are just massive of building out an entire ecosystem around a whole new technology sector.
All right. Appreciate that. There's a bad term that goes around that's called blockchain bros. I hope none of you guys are blockchain bros. It's not a very inclusive term, is it? Shone, you mentioned the technology has to solve big problems. And maybe everyone can comment on this. What are some of the big problems? I mean, we've seen, one of the symptoms of last year was that we saw a lot of Me Too's. I'm going to put blockchain on a mining project. I'm going to put I don't know what that means. What are the big problems that we need to solve with this technology?
Yeah, certainly. What are the opportunities you can solve with this technology,
Yeah.
and what does it really do? And so, our company theories and the way we look at stuff, we always say, Bitcoin represents the next generation of the internet. It represents that trust layer. And so ultimately, you have this ability to reduce corruption and create new mechanisms to help e-commerce and all kinds of mechanisms for trust. Anything requiring trust on the internet is going to leverage the Bitcoin and other popular crypto networks. But certainly, that represents the global thing. So when you look at, that's on the public blockchain, the public internet.
Yep.
People like to use the word blockchain. Well, blockchain is going to solve everything. We're going to use it in our company. It's going to solve it. That's like running an internal network. And so if you're looking at it from an internal network point of view, say it would be supply chain or any other things where you require trust and more efficiencies, what it really gets down to is the ability to audit. Because as soon as you put human in the loop, you've got a situation where you can still have bad data going in, but the point of the blockchain is you're going to be able to find where this issue is happening sooner.
Right.
And so these are the kind of problems that where companies are going to address is the not just data integrity, but also the ability to track it. And these are big issues that will create much more efficiencies, the ability to identify and also create more accountability. And what ultimately you're going to see that within public companies, you'll see that within other companies, and it should create more investor trust because there's much more clarity on what's going on inside the organizations.
Cool. I see a couple of...
Yeah, we do a lot of work with large organizations that are trying to figure this stuff out. And every time we look at that, it's not like you just, this whole blockchain bro comment of blockchain everything, do an ICO. That I think we're past that. We've kind of matured beyond that point. I think that's become very clear. But there is, without a doubt, a process that companies have to go through from the board level and the IT and the infrastructure level to evaluate what this technology means to them, identify what other things are going on in their industry that are relevant so they can create a bit of a precedent. Then they have to evaluate their entire industry down from like management, personnel, and their systems, come up with how they would go about integrating this. But it's not just a how do you make money from blockchain. I think when you solve key problems, the key problems that you're solving is in cost savings. And it's not like you implement the technology and now there's a whole new profit center. But there's a significant thing on the other end of it, which is by going through the right process and framework, you identify where you can save millions of dollars a year in theft, reduction, HR, losses, by just creating a safeguard through what this technology enables from the fundamental level. So it's more about cost savings that can be extremely meaningful for companies rather than just what are you implementing to make what amount of money. And I think that's also an interesting part about the Canadian market side of it is that yeah, we're first movers when we speculate on creating new opportunities. This is a market town. We saw what happened with cannabis. We know what's going on in mining. So we went really quickly on that front. But I think what's super interesting now is in the current spot that we're sitting, we always like to say too, like, you know, if you really dive deep and you look around and see what's going on, not just from the capital markets perspective, because I think right now, I think it's a horrible indicator of what's actually going on, where if you dive deep and you look into the amount of Fortune 500s doing what specifically, there's much more companies that are doing something. Like it's easier to identify the companies that aren't addressing the technology than the ones that are. You can look to indicators and say, what are the Fortune 500 doing? You can look at the enterprise side from that level, and then you can look at the other side where, you know, look at ICE, look at the Intercontinental Exchange, look at BACT, look at JP Morgan, look at these national exchanges, what's being done. Look at other indicators, not just the price indicators of today. Look at all of the engineers and programmers, the things that, you know, we go through in our teams all the time. If you go to GitHub, where are the brightest minds, developers, and engineers focusing their time right now? Without a doubt, it's in this area. So you have to look at other indicators for where is the time and value and money being placed, and how long is it going to take to kind of be realized from the Canadian market perspective, I think is a big question.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'll let the other guys jump in here on this. What problems are we solving?
I think to go specifically to problems, the big one is the one that's right in front of us. Like everybody talks about trade finance, supply chain. That stuff's way out there. It's not going to be done for years. You got to get too many of these enterprises and banks to get on board to do it. The one that's right in front of us is the rebuilding of this internet. It's the infrastructure. So supply chain and all that stuff, trade finance, those are like the electric cars. We're still just building out these roads. And the big one is that you guys see it every day, the data breaches. Giving privacy control that me as a user, why should Facebook be able to take my data, sell that, and I get no return on that? The current internet does not allow that. With the blockchain, decentralized-based systems, we can have complete accountability that, hey, Facebook, you're like a bank. You're borrowing my data. Yeah, you sold it off, but yeah, I'm getting some return on that back. And we can actually track that, audit, and keep them accountable. If I want to shut off my account with Facebook, I can make it with decentralized blockchain technologies that they have no access anymore. Right now, if I delete my account on Facebook, or any startup that comes up, and let's say they shut down, did they really delete my data? Probably not. Their VCs probably said, take the rest of that data, sell it off. So it's that accountability. So I think the biggest one right now is the rebuilding of the internet that gives all of us here security. And that's like the companies that I know that have been, no matter these downturns, the infrastructure guys are working on rebuilding the internet from us, like databases, content delivery networks, mesh networks. That's all part of that.
I agree. If these big platforms want to keep you as a user, they have to incentivize you. And that doesn't mean just badges or some other bullshit.
Totally.
It's got to be something real.
Just kind of building on what Pavel said, like, you see a lot of companies that ran ICOs last year, their tokens are worth a lot less than they were when they initially issued them. And I think that there's still a lot of value in that, but the tokens that will actually survive and the ones that will continue are the ones that are platforms. Businesses like putting Uber on the blockchain, they're going to zero. But when you look at projects that are actually platforms like Bluzelle, projects that are actually basically the pipes that will be the foundation of the next internet, those are the projects that are really going to survive. Yeah. I also think that the Canadian markets pose an opportunity for a lot of those projects because they have depressed values. And maybe they don't have as much money as they initially did when they initially did their raise, but the Canadian markets are a really good opportunity for those projects to actually take the assets that they have, the technology, the depressed assets they have in cryptocurrency, and they can actually come to the Canadian markets, use that as a foundation to go public in this system that we have that kind of doesn't exist anywhere else in terms of making it easy for venture companies to do public offerings. We have a perfect ecosystem for that, and that actually also links to the security token market, which a lot of people are talking about. And Canada is actually the perfect place for that. A lot of people say that there's places in the world where we don't have the regulation for security tokens yet, but in Canada we already have it, and we have the issue. We have the framework for becoming a reporting issue. We have the framework for doing the legal. We have the framework for accounting, all for venture companies, small companies. Yep. And I think that building on that, the CSE and the TSXV, but more the CSE, are in a really good position to be a really attractive market for companies globally that want to do security token offerings.
Yeah, so we see that trend, that movement from the ICO world to the security token world, where there's a company's gone through a legitimate vetting process to be able to float a security, but based like a security token, it's blockchain underneath it all. And I think next time someone comes to you and says, I got a good investment on Gibraltar or Malta, figure out how the hell you're going to get that investment out once you cut that check. So that's why Canada and North America writ large is important to be at the forefront of this, I think, because that's going to be where you can actually execute a trade and actually be a participant.
Well, to add to that, I mean, Canada's got a crazy unique opportunity, which overseas, so I live in Singapore for the last 2.5 years, and hey, you're Canadian. Everybody, in Asia, Canadians are actually well respected in the crypto space, but yet Canada itself overall is really small and behind. So it's like you got all this brain power over there that's building companies doing cool stuff, and it's like we should be leveraging that and saying, yeah, the Canadian market's actually the better ones to go into and can be leaders and put the money there because it's got all the systems in place that you said. Mm-hmm. So it's really, you've got this kind of weird dynamic where it's like Canadians here will call me like, hey, we're talking to these guys about this. I was like, in the crypto blockchain world overseas, globally, we're like, yeah, nobody knows those guys. Like, there's a tight circle.
Yeah.
And so we are a bit behind, but the brain power is ahead. It's a weird dynamic.
And you look like a lot of ICOs that have gone to zero. The reason they went to zero is because they did effectively what you would call as a public offering, but they didn't do PR, they didn't do IR, they didn't educate their shareholder base on what they were doing and how they were doing it, and they weren't transparent. And I think that's what Canadian public markets do really well for venture companies, for companies that are just starting. We have the framework to do all of that, especially around IR. And I think that that's an important piece of the next generation of ICOs, the next generation of companies that use blockchain technology in raising capital. They'll have to do that, and we're in a perfect position to actually leverage all that.
Awesome. I think we're already seeing that. Even the conversation I had with Richard Carlton yesterday, I think I totally agree with what we're saying. There's a huge opportunity as it relates to the infrastructure that has to be built. The rails between our existing world and with this new technology is being built. But on the other side, when you look at when you look at ICOs previously, but then you look at what's in front of us with regulatory compliant security tokens, you look at the framework that exists for our venture landscape with the CSE and junior companies, the ability to raise capital. The security token opportunity is not yet here, but it's imminent, it's close. And the framework and the pathway towards doing that and becoming a leader is right in front of us. We alluded to a lot of that yesterday with what the CSE is doing, some of the opportunities that we're looking at today. But even when you traverse the globe, when you talk to Tom Lee, who's all over Bloomberg, having a conversation with him, he said that Canada can be the Netherlands of capital markets if we do things the right way. And that's just referred to how our existing securities landscape is put together today. And it lends itself very favorably to this more mature, grown-up version of what we saw with ICOs, and I think that's a very exciting thing to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm going to let you, we're going to do 2-minute warning, so I'll let you finish that point.
I was just going to say, that absolutely, certainly the CSE and those kind of things create great clarity. The irony with ICOs is that blockchain is supposed to be this whole trust technology where 80% of the ICOs are completely fraudulent and are listing offshore for obvious reasons so that they can launder money. And our company works with law enforcement out of Washington, D.C. That's what we do with our products, so we see this firsthand. But ultimately, it also gets down to ICOs and risk scoring and stuff like that. So we look at and exchange risk scoring. You have ICOs that are knowingly fraudulent. They're getting listed on these different exchanges around the world. What's the exchange's risk and liability in that? They are almost complicit in a lot of these things. They're taking large listing fees. So when you start to look at it through a much more structured traditional finance combined with the underlying technology of ICOs, which creates much less friction for investors and lowers costs, and you do it with the CSE, you have a winning combination there.
I'll give everyone 10 more seconds or 20 more seconds just to relay to the audience who I predominantly think are investors. What should they be on the lookout for or be excited for in the next year if they're looking to invest in blockchain technology or companies specifically that leverage that technology?
Well, I think look for value in platforms. Companies that are building things, as Pavel said, companies that are building things that'll be are foundational technologies, not aspirational goals, I guess. Building on that, I think you'll see more movement into the Canadian public venture market from companies who want to do security token offerings. And I think as the CSE rolls that in, you'll see people joining the CSE to be a part of that next wave when tokens are issued and whenever that comes to fruition.
So invest in platforms, look at platforms, not just bullet points on PowerPoint decks that say blockchain. Pavel?
Yeah, to go with that, don't get too caught up in these things about scalability issues and blockchain limitations. There's not enough users on there that take advantage of that, so that stuff's going to be solved in time. And then the other thing is, if you're going in, be in for the long term. If you're a weak hand that can't handle like a month of volatility or 2 weeks and you can't handle the year, don't even enter it. Just have a total long-term outlook.
Yep. Dean?
Yeah, the one thing we always emphasize is there's more being done in advancing right now. We're talking about this a little bit backstage, is that there's more being done right now than a few months back when all these companies are being financed. So that part's exciting. So I think the main thing we say is, from our perspective, keep a lookout of really who's doing what and what does that mean for an investor. But we are in fact early. We're not there with security tokens. When we are there, which is imminent, that's going to be a unique opportunity for investors to look at that. And it's a whole new landscape. And I think the other part of it is look at what companies are doing what. Go right to the level of saying what kind of business and application are they building on top of this tech that allow you to see by example rather than just being able to try to mitigate or navigate the understanding of the technology. It's also helpful to look at who's building what does that mean for their industry, and what is the actual functionality. Gives more awareness, but we're early, it's exciting, and it's good times.
Yeah, we're beeping, so unless there's something you desperately need to say, Shone.
No, just look for fundamental companies that are solving real problems, and the blockchain and Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular, is not going to go away. This is a fundamental shift of the internet, and their opportunity is huge. And if you are to look at companies, how we do it, we look at their development team. And if they don't have a good development team, they're not going anywhere. And that's the asset test. So I'll leave it at that.
Give your panel a hand, folks. Good stuff.